Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss the challenges of designing an infrastructure that includes elements for combating the threat of ransomware. My name is Alex Zagajewski. I am a senior solutions architect for Winslow Technology Group. And joining me today is Greg Swain, Director of Solutions Architecture.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. So before we jump into today's topic, I'll start off with a brief overview of Winslow Technology Group, then hand the mic over to Greg to discuss today's topic. Throughout the presentation, we're happy to take your questions via the Q&A feature of this webinar app. And I should also mention that attendees of this webinar are indeed entered into a raffle to win a set of Bose earbuds or a Dell mobile adapter speakerphone. Make sure you stay on for the entire program to be eligible, and I encourage you to ask a good, relevant question for a second chance to win. So a little bit about Winslow. We've been in business for over 18 years as a technology solutions provider, headquartered in Waltham, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. But we do have a distributed workforce with satellite offices in Charlotte, North Carolina, as well as New York, New York. Our goal is to identify and develop expertise in what we call game-changing technologies, with our partnership with leaders such as Dell being a stellar example of that. Winslow works with customers like you to tailor technology solutions that solve for both today's problems and tomorrow's opportunities. We specialize in hardware, software, and services, not only for the core data center, but also end user compute, complemented by our cybersecurity and disaster recovery, as well as cloud solutions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. How's my audio?
Fantastic. Just let me know when to jump to the next slide, please.
Super. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. I also want to thank Alex Zagajewski, who not only being a friend and colleague, has over 20 years of industry experience in information technology in verticals that are of particular interest in security, whether it's FinServ, state and local government, or acting consultant in one of those capacities of those organizations. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this birds of a feather concept, and the fact that we're all in this together. And it's the job of everybody in information technology or anybody who uses computer systems in their organizations to really be security conscious. So today we're going to run through some of the effects of ransomware, how they get in, and ways that you can, I don't want to say easily, help prevent it and recover from it, but ways that are inexpensive, leveraging technology that you probably already have. We'll use some case studies. I've also focused on some of the things that have happened to Winslow Technology Group, but they've also happened to our clients. We can be a little bit more open when they happen to us because we don't necessarily want to air other people's dirty laundry, but our dirty laundry is kind of okay. Next slide, please. So the first thing is the attack vectors that bad actors or threat actors use to get into your environment. And I don't think this is going to come as news to anybody, but there's some interesting facts in here. And we'll talk about some of the commonality later on and how they compound by using different tactics together to get into your environment and then move laterally. The first one we want to discuss is this concept of a third-party website breach. And this is really where a database of email addresses and passwords or usernames are leaked to the web. Bad actors go in, they compromise those third-party sites. A lot of them aren't very secure. And we'll give you an example. So, for instance, a lot of our account executives on the holidays will sign up for Drizzly to ship goods to some of our clients. Or they'll use a Winslow Technology email address and hopefully not the same password, but we know a lot of times you use variations on passwords. So when those databases get leaked, what ends up happening is bad actors go and they mine that data if they're currently looking at your organization or they notice there's a number of the same domain names and credentials. They'll use that to give them kind of an easy in to start trying passwords against your environment. There's a couple of different ways you can protect against this. The first one is setting up a policy. I know this is easier said than done, and some of these policies are hard to enforce, but have a policy where your organization's employees should not be using their corporate email to sign up for third-party sites, especially if they're sites that might not be really secure. I know that can be difficult, especially in my line of work. I sign up for a lot of training, technical training, and I want that to kind of go to my work email. But a lot of those organizations are very secure organizations. While I probably should create another email or use a private email, I will start doing that. But it's one of those things, no matter how much we work with technology, in the back of your mind, you should treat your corporate email account as sort of sacred ground and try not to use it in any other place. Another way to help combat that, or at least recognize it, is to utilize dark web scans. So what happens there is, you can do these yourselves. A lot of times our customers and clients will come to us to help us run these. And essentially what you're doing is just scanning the dark web for these leaks. And the way that they do that is they simply looking for, at winslowtechnologygroup.com or at yourorganization.com, and you can see if those email addresses are leaked from some of these third-party sites. And often if they have those, they have passwords. And like I said, you tend to use variations of those passwords, which gives the attacker a good understanding of what your password might consist of, or at least part of it. The second really common attack vector that we see is phishing and spear phishing. These two together are one of the hardest things to protect against because they're really part of social engineering, right? So they're utilizing, again, these emails that they probably have gotten from third-party sites or just guessed, right? It's not super hard to guess what my email address is once you kind of know the format. At Winslow Technology Group, you could probably make a very educated guess as to what my username is and my full email. So one of the situations that happened at Winslow is we received an invoice and the routing number was different. The email looked legitimate, came in, went to our operations finance department, and they fulfilled that invoice, and come to find out, obviously we paid a bad actor. And some of the easy ways to prevent against this, a lot of it is user training, right? And in third-party services like KnowBe4. Also, email filtering. So if you do have a way to recognize external emails or recognize URLs that look suspicious, a lot of email filters have that kind of stuff built in. I love the simple fact of flagging an email as external, because oftentimes exploits are going from, say Scott Winslow to the finance department asking him to pay for something or write a check to someone. If that is flagged as external, immediately your ears would go up and you'd understand, all right, this probably didn't actually come from Scott since he's not an external to the organization. Another common attack vector, and this is probably one of the most exploited on the internet or in your corporate environment, and this is unpatched systems. And there's a number of different types of systems that are exploited, but for the most part, we know untouched systems are a struggle. Whether it's Patch Tuesday for Windows, which we've been doing forever, or now Linux systems are under attack, but even completely hardware-based systems like firewalls or even software firewalls are now under attack. So one of the things that attackers do is they leverage exploits that are published. And this is the really scary part. So these threat actors, they're not one-off people. These are organizations that do this for a living, day in and day out. They are working on hacking your environment. They keep a database of organizations, the types of firewalls they have, and the patch levels that come out. So when there's a notification that's sent out to the market at large that says, this firewall has this vulnerability and here's a patch. If you don't patch that very quickly, what ends up happening is those threat actors look at that vulnerability. They know what firewalls you have. They know whether you applied that patch or not because they'll rescan it. And if you haven't, they will use that patch and that exploit that's in that patch that you didn't execute on to get into your environment and then move laterally. There's a number of technologies you can use to ensure that you have a current patch on all of your systems. Also, you want to make sure that you have baselining and network monitoring enabled. All right, let's move on to the next slide, Alex. So what happens after they gain access? One of the most surprising things to me was how long threat actors will remain in your environment, moving laterally, collecting information, and essentially letting their bad activities incubate until they're ready. On average, it's about 9 months, which is really surprising to me when I first started doing presentations like this and doing a lot of research. They are not immediately getting into your environment and extracting data. They are trying to move unseen in the environment and create deep hooks. And these deep hooks are things like creating admin accounts, canceling admin accounts, creating backdoors for themselves in case you find that they're in there and start locking them out, they can get back in. And during this time, they'll often encrypt your primary data sets and either encrypt or destroy your backups. And then oftentimes, before they encrypt that data, one of the things that they're doing is exfiltrating some of your critical data sets. And we'll talk about why in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So if you have one of these attacks, how do you recover? Well, there's a lot of different ways, but sometimes you do pay the ransom, and we'll talk about why you pay the ransom in a few minutes. Some of our clients have paid ransoms, some of them have not. Many of them we've helped, far more than pay the ransom, many of them we help recover via a number of different methodologies, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. There are a number of different ways to get your data back, but one thing you really want to do is you want to restore that information into a pristine environment, and we'll talk about things Winslow has done and things our clients have done to help make that recovery as fast as possible. Next slide. So I think one of the things that is very confusing is the amount of security products on the market. And I don't want to say you don't need them all. There's a lot of overlap. A lot of them do the same things. You do need a number of them, to form those security layers. Things like mail filtering, DNS filtering, antivirus, hopefully next generation, some type of detection and response, and all of those different things work together. But what we're going to focus on today really is leveraging the infrastructure that you have and ways to optimize that infrastructure that exists to really allow you to recover and also detect some of these breaches before they become an issue. Next slide, Alex. So some of the easiest recovery technologies is probably something that you've been doing for years. I know I've been leveraging storage snapshots for at least 15 years in different environments. Not to say I was really ahead of the curve. It's just something that businesses I worked at chose to do. So you absolutely want to leverage those storage snapshots. They take a very small footprint. So now everything is redirect on write or write aside. So it's really a very small percentage of that overall capacity needs to be set aside. We are often adding more capacity into our client systems to ensure they can keep those snapshots for a longer period of time, especially taking into account the incubation time a lot of these threat actors are leveraging. The nice thing about a lot of these storage arrays that take snapshots is they have a relatively small attack surface. And what we mean by that is while threat actors tend to target Windows and Linux operating systems and even firewalls, VPN systems, not a lot of them target things like a PowerStore or a Unity or a compelling storage array. The reason is there's far few of them out there, and it's just not something they have a lot of experience with. They don't have one to test on. Right? Everybody has, you can download Linux for free, and everybody has Windows, so those are easy things for them to test on. Some of the nice things about snapshots is it allows you to keep an original copy of the data for forensic analysis. And then we can run the entire environment often off snapshots for storing it into a clean environment. Sometimes leveraging Winslow Technology Group hardware or servers so we can give you some loaner hardware so you can then recover that data into this pristine environment. Many storage arrays do need to be hardened. And I'm going to put into the chat after this meeting a document that our CTO created. It's on his blog that talks about how to harden different types of storage arrays. He targets a specific storage array, but any modern storage array will have a lot of similar capabilities. So 95% of it will transfer to the storage array you have, even if it's from a different vendor. One thing I do want to hit on, and I find this kind of ironic because we love our Active Directory, we love the ease of use it entails, and we love integrating LDAP technology in leveraging Active Directory for different types of appliances. Oftentimes, our storage array is one of those devices where the admin accounts are Active Directory integrated. We are encouraging a lot of our clients to essentially stop doing that and keep the storage array completely autonomous, because while you can't necessarily read snapshot data from a storage array, you certainly can go in as an admin on a storage array and destroy those snapshots. Next slide, please, Alex. All right, another recovery technology is data replication or bunkering. Similar topics. Bunkering is typically when we're going to send that data to a secondary storage array or device, and it's essentially a dark site. That's good for a number of reasons, right? If there's nothing there, really, there's almost zero attack surface. But then you do have to worry about recovering, and that might take a little bit longer. There are a number of ways where you may want to leverage data replication and also have servers at that location. Again, you'd probably want to ensure that you are creating a different security mechanism for authenticating, right? If you have one giant environment and you're replicating and it's all into the same Active Directory with the same security across your layer 2, that secondary environment is probably only as secure as your first. So you definitely want to give some thought to how you're authenticating that secondary environment. Also, you may want to ensure that you have hardware resources there from a compute standpoint, so that when you do recover those volumes, you can recover it into a nice, pristine compute layer. And there's a number of different ways you can do that, right? Firewalls, managed switches, rules. Some of the best bang for your buck is something really easy. You can keep those virtual machines, or typically virtual machines at the secondary site. You can literally keep them off and only power them on once a week to make sure they get updates, etc. It's kind of an inexpensive way to do it. And something that our clients have often done. What really drives the adoption of your different technologies around data replication is really what the business's RTO and RPO requirements are. All right, let's go to the next slide. Backups. Everybody's very well familiar with backups, and one of the things that we've seen is oftentimes the backups are getting encrypted, deleted, or somehow affected where they're not a viable recovery mechanism. One of the best ways to ensure that they are valid is by creating an immutable backup and using some type of versioning. You can do that, break that into the cloud. You can do that with devices. Things like a data domain will allow you to write to it. And again, it's a hardened appliance that then allows you to write to another data domain at another location. You can also write to pretty much anybody's cloud, into an object store. And those object stores, for the most part, are completely immutable by nature. You definitely want to ensure that you had some multi-factor authentication, just so it wasn't easy for somebody to actually get in there and delete them. But most of them, when you enable versioning and immutability, they do make you enable something like multi-factor authentication. And last line here, don't forget to test your backups. One of the things that we found is many of our clients who had issues, they didn't have a regular schedule of testing their backups. And it's extremely important to ensure that they are valid. Also, whether it's backups or snapshots, if you do have a threat actor in your environment that is executing ransomware and encrypting data sets, oftentimes that is noticed by either a snapshot anomaly or a backup anomaly. And what I mean is, typically when you're running a backup or a snapshot, it's only change data that we're backing up, right? Modern technology has given us that power. It'll take the changes and then kind of do a synthetic full. But the backups and the snapshots are relatively small. It behooves you to either monitor what's happening in terms of the amount of data you're snapping or the amount of data you're backing up, and have some sort of mechanism to recognize that. Oftentimes you can build in alerts into either the backup or snapshotting system to recognize that, or there's other technologies like CyberSense that will notice anomalous activity, like an extreme uptick in the amount of data you've decided to back up. Well, not decided, that happens as part of the backup job. I'll be honest, that's something I had never really thought of before I started really thinking about how to protect myself and recognize that I have ransomware in my environment. All right, next slide, please. So how can Winslow Technology Group help, and what have we done for other clients? really hardening and recovery services. So we have things like vulnerability assessments, which allow us to look at your entire environment and then write a report, and either we can correct some of the challenges or weak points in your security posture, or you can do that yourselves, or we can give you direction on how to do it. Also, how do you recover? Oftentimes what we're doing is we're deploying loaner equipment from our lab, whether it's SAN-based technology or compute-based technology, and it gives you the ability to recover into a pristine environment so that you don't have to stand up your new environment right next to the one that is compromised. And then how do we ensure that this never happens again? Alex is going to talk a little bit about some of the assessments that we do. We also have a consultancy service and a number of different vendors that we work with that help prevent these sort of situations from happening and recognize when they are happening. Right, next slide, please. So we have a couple of real life case studies, and yeah, we've obfuscated some of the data so you can't figure out who it is exactly, and we've already got approval to talk about this from our clients. But some of the most interesting ones is a local tech firm here in Eastern Massachusetts. Users' passwords were obtained from the dark web. We talked about that a little bit. Allowed them to get past the VPN, and then what did they do? Instantly, they started working on VMware and unpatched Windows systems and moving horizontally in the environment. Backups and replication were no help, but storage snapshots were able to restore. Next slide. Similarly, another client of ours was attacked aggressively, and their entire environment was essentially encrypted. There was also a data exfiltration situation. But this is again where attack vector that we talked about in terms of phishing was the attack vector. So somebody clicked on a link, and we've all done this. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. Clicked on a link, noticed it was a bad link, but unfortunately that gave a threat actor access to their system. And again, they started moving horizontally in their environment, deleting not only the local backups, but also the cloud-based backups. So all of their data was encrypted. In this case, the client ended up paying a $700,000 extortion fee, not to recover their data. Winslow Technology Group helped them recover their data from their snapshots and was able to help them stand up a new pristine environment. But the reason they decided to pay in Bitcoin some of what the threat actor requested was to save reputation and not have that data then leaked all over the internet. So there's some commonality between these case studies, and what we can see is that bad actors use multiple attack vectors to get into the environment and then move horizontally, and that's why you need to have layers of security. You can't just protect the perimeter, you've got to protect everything inside as well, and you also need a lot of reporting and somebody monitoring what's happening to recognize that you do have an attack incident or an active incident happening. Next slide, please. So some of the common themes, an ounce of prevention. I think it's more than an ounce, but a certain amount of prevention is certainly what you want to apply, right? So add capacity to your storage array, increase the snapshots. Often, many of our clients do have secondary arrays, or they're replicating into the cloud. Make sure that you're hardening those environments and using some type of deep security, whether it's multi-factor authentication, immutability, etc., versioning. And then oftentimes we're working with these clients to help harden their backup environments and storage arrays. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to drop something into the chat, which is going to give you a good blog on how to harden your storage array. Run a vulnerability assessment, including a dark web scan. This stuff should be really normal hygiene in your IT infrastructure and part of your security group's awareness training and delivery. Awareness training. Make sure that everybody's getting awareness training. It's hard to quantify the value of this. So many attacks are through social engineering and through phishing. Have some type of managed detection and response. Really important, right? If you don't have the manpower to man a SIM and do your own threat hunting, it's really important to have somebody looking at this stuff every day. If you can't do it internally, we certainly recommend that you use some sort of managed service. And then also next generation patch management, but also next generation antivirus. So you want something that can find indicators of compromise and be able to identify zero-day threats. And that next generation antivirus very often can do that. And then something Winslow Technology Group often does for our clients is deliver co-managed environment where we help monitor the environment, do scans, update and patch their environment to ensure that they're at the security posture level they need. At this time, I'm going to turn this back over to Alex Zagiewski, who's going to take us through some of our assessments.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. That was a really, really great overview of what we should be thinking about in order to make our infrastructures as ransomware resistant as possible. Notice I said resistant. A lot of information to cover in a short span of time certainly seems very, very potentially overwhelming, but having it laid out just the way you did almost seems like it is absolutely attainable. And being able to get this sort of guidance on huge projects such as these from a trusted advisor like Winslow really does make that job possible, if not easier. Granted that this conversation was, a little bit high level and certainly will need to be tailored to one's specific environment. And this is where this slide comes in. We have a number of complimentary assessments. Each of them is about a 60-minute consultative interview. We'll give you a detailed picture of where your environment currently stands in regard to areas such as data center, remote workforce, or the hybrid class. Plus, we'll provide recommendations for where you should be headed. We especially recommend the NIST security evaluation as a good starting point for your cybersecurity journey. Speaking of the cybersecurity journey, Winslow's practice follows the NIST cybersecurity framework shown here, and this graph shows how the various technologies and services we offer line up with the 5 pillars of that framework. And as I always like to say, we offer our customers an organized and comprehensive cybersecurity program that strives to also be cost effective. So don't wait and contact your Winslow account executive today. And unfortunately, we seem to have run out of our allotted time. A lot of great content, a number of really, really good questions and comments have come in. We're going to address those via email to you folks. Again, we're sorry for running over the time. The winner of the raffles will be contacted via email after the webinar. So we hope you've gained some very valuable knowledge today. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like more information about Winslow or any of our services, please drop us a note at webinars, plural, at winslowtg.com. Again, thanks for coming and have a great day. Be safe.